Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Looking forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've been connected through Brent and John Marsh, who've been on the show, and I've done a little cheating. I've got some questions that I had to dig for. So we'll get to those, but let's kind of start with your career in tech, and kind of start with how you went from this tech career to what you're doing now.
Sure. I went into tech because I was selling Cutco knives in college, and I was doing really well with that. But my father-in-law said, you're good at selling, but you're going to cap yourself out. So the two things you should sell is either private planes or you should sell software. So one of those two, because the transactions could be in the tens of millions. And so I think I put out a couple applications on working for private jet brokers and the Falcons and Gulfstreams and the whatnot. I don't think I got any responses back now that I think about it. So I went into software, went into a startup called Wise. We sold to Dell. I enjoyed the whole startup game and kind of smaller team and wearing multiple hats and being multifaceted. Ended up in Dell. That was fun. I was a chief of staff to one of the CEOs there. And that was fun, but there was hundreds of thousands of people and it was bureaucratic, and I got to learn things about scale and operations and international affairs and taking the company private. I was part of a pretty neat team to help them do that. But my thing was in smaller entities, smaller businesses. So I went back to the startup world and joined DocuSign. And DocuSign, we grew from about 150 people from the time I got there to when I left. We were about 6,000 people. And we were about a 40 or $50 billion market cap. So it was pretty big. The market's changed since then in the last 2 years. But software to me was always, it was awesome to see the hyperscale, the innovation, how smart people were that had tried to attack these problems, right? It was incredible to just see the impact that it would have in other entities and businesses around efficiencies and automation, streamlining and digitization. All of that was awesome. But to me, it never made me tick because I've always loved kind of boring, unsexy, just operating normal businesses. Car washes, dry cleaners, landscape companies, financial service firms, whatever, restaurants. I've always liked things I could see, feel, understand very logically, and that's always been the thing I've loved most. So I pursued that.
Right. You already hit on one of the questions, but apparently you kind of glossed over selling Cutco knives and that you were pretty good at it. Weren't you like one of the top salesmen in the entire country selling knives?
I was, yeah.
Okay, well, how? Yeah. What did you do that was so successful?
Oh man, that's a whole entire podcast alone. I'll share a couple things that I think helped me become. So I was the number one salesperson in the country out of like 50,000 people for a couple years.
Gosh.
It's one of the things I'm most proud of because I had a severe stutter problem growing up, and it's really hard cold calling someone and being like, "Hi, is Chris there?" And Chris is like, "Yeah, this is he." And I can't get anything out of my mouth, because of my stutter problem. So it was really hard asking for that. But I think that the things that made me successful was I was just utterly dedicated and committed. Someone once told me, when your back is against the wall, your true colors show. And my back was against the wall. My father was sick. We didn't have much money at all. I didn't want to put any more burden on them because they couldn't afford even their own life, yet alone my life or college or anything. So I just felt that pressure. I gave it all I had, probably pretty unhealthy. I got my identity from that clearly. But that was like hard work, just really, 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 really hard work. Just every morning getting up early, asking the teachers to go to the bathroom, make cold calls in the bathroom, sit outside of the cafeteria, make cold calls, So just the sacrifice, like there was a lot of sacrifice that went into becoming the best. Another one was the power of pipeline and the power of referrals. That I was utterly focused. I was so fearful of losing referrals, of not having appointments to go to, that I honestly put more emphasis on ensuring that I had a rapport with the customer than ensuring the customer bought. So at the beginning of the appointment, I'd be like, "Hey, Chris, so I'm here, show you Cutco today, but I honestly don't care if you buy or not. If you bought, that'd be awesome. It's a great product. You probably cook, so you're probably going to want something. But even if you don't, so long as I do a good presentation, if you could just refer me to people, like, if you know anyone else that could see the presentation, that's all I ask for. Is that something that sounds like reasonable to you?" And you'd be like, "Yeah." So in your mind, you're thinking, "Yeah, if he does a good job, I'll introduce him, whatever, to Brent Beashore and John Marsh, right?" And so for me, that was the win. Knowing that the sale would follow. But to me, I kept what's most important, right? Because if you bought $10,000 but didn't refer me to anyone, I have no one to go see tomorrow, right? And so that was extremely important that salespeople today and business owners today don't think of. They think of the sale now instead of the predictability tomorrow, right? And the pipeline tomorrow. Another thing was I really believed in the product, and so I wasn't scared to ask like aggressively. So if the biggest and best set was $5,000, everyone in this little Cutco was like, I'm not going to even show that page. Like, maybe if I have some guts, I'll be like, oh, there's another set, but they would not really position it and ask for the sale on it. And I started asking for 2 of those sets with silverware, with pots and pans. So it'd be like, today, I wouldn't be doing my job, Chris, if I didn't ask you to spend $25,000 today on knives. And they would do kind of what you just did, and then they'd realize I'm dead serious. So I would say, believe in the product and have the courage to ask. I'm very upset at nonprofit and ministry leaders in our country today. I meet with them and they don't ask me and my wife to give aggressively. And I think it's because they don't truly believe in the product themselves. And if they do, and they're like, we like to get you involved. Anything helps. I'm like, okay, like anything helps. Versus the people like Scott Harrison at Charity Water or Brett Hagler of News Story. They'll be like, "Hey, look, I'm not scared to ask you, Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn, for $10 million, right? Because you could help save the water crisis, or you could help the homelessness problem, right?" They believe in what they're offering, and they're inviting you into something that they believe is value for both. So I think a couple of those things: hard work, power of tomorrow, power of referrals instead of the sale now, and believing in something so much that you ask for the big, hairy, audacious order,
And the only thing I would ask to that is, you believed in the knives, you believed in Cutco. Is it possible, like, people can believe in just about anything? It's not like you come out of the womb and you're destined to believe in knives. Like, people can believe in anything. Why were you able to believe in knives? Because you had a family that you had to help, you had to make sales, you had to do all these things. Like, I guess the question is, what can get people motivated to believe in something? Because it's not necessarily the product you believe in, it's the whole process and being involved. Is that not right?
Yeah, I think it's 3 things. I think it's knowing, believing, and doing. So one is knowing in your head, right? Like, I have a lint roller here. In my head, I can't even get myself to believe, to actually know that this thing adds value. Like it just doesn't register. It just does not for me personally. So I can even, yet alone believe it, yet alone act on it, right? For Cutco, I knew the facts, right? So I knew the facts that the company's been around since 1949. I knew the facts that it was hundreds of millions of dollars. I knew the facts that millions of families had it. I knew the facts that it was American made, that it was guaranteed. So I didn't know all that. Then I actually started to hear people say how much they use them, how long they've had them, how great they are. So I started to believe it. Right there, I believe after the belief of anything, it actually becomes courage. I think right after there, you have to actually have the courage and the audacity to actually ask now, So I believe a lot of nonprofit leaders, they do know, or a lot of business leaders, like we own a pool company, right? And I talk to my pool sales leaders about this. I say, that we're the best pool company in our market. That we can build it on time and on budget. That a lot of people want to use us. You believe in your heart that this is the right thing for them to do. You believe in the investment that this costs. The ROI it's going to have on their family, their kids. But some of you literally cannot have the courage to look at another human in their face to actually ask for the order. And what's the best way to ask for the order, or for the investor, or for the whatever? It's to ask. It's quite literally to actually ask, so many times. I remember when I was young and not dating and not married to my wife, I would always tell my buddies dating around at the University of Alabama that would have a crush on a girl or whatever. And yeah, blah, blah, blah. I know that, she thinks highly of me. I really like her. I feel like we have chemistry, but, we just haven't gone on a date yet. I'm like, have you actually asked? Actually asked. And they're like, well, no, but she knows, I want to go on a date with her, or in this case, they know that I want them to donate to my nonprofit. It's like, just ask, right? Just take the courage to ask for the order.
I love it. All right. Before we move into Garden City, I wanted to ask a question on DocuSign and being chief of staff. What does the chief of staff do at a company that's scaling like that? Like, what did you do in that role?
Yeah, I believe in the chief of staff role, arguably more than almost any other role. I believe it is such a force multiplier. A CEO is called to be strategic, not tactical. CEO needs margin for relationships and to think and be creative and strategic. Yet, as businesses scale, someone has to answer emails, someone has to follow up on the calls, someone has to repair on the calls, right? Someone has to do everything A through Z, right? And so all that's tactical. And the more employees, the more fill in the blank, the more tactical it becomes. And so a chief of staff is literally an extension of you that allows you to stay strategic and allows you to stay focused on the vision, the mission, the values of the organization, so that you have an extension of you that talks for you at times, that thinks as on your behalf as time, that applies for you, that follows up on certain things for you, that project manages certain things for you, so that you have margin. So it's one of the roles I have now, even preparing for this call, right? I have a chief of staff internally at Garden City that was emailing you, asking what are the topics we're going to speak about, right? What are the things I need to prep about, right? So forth. He gave me a whole write-up on this podcast, right? I know all my meetings for tomorrow are already followed up on, or already scheduled, right? All the strategic initiatives that I need to tactically do, they're acting on my behalf so that I have time to focus on my most important strategic relationships, so that I could touch and walk alongside the CEOs of the companies we own. So that's what it does. It gives you margin. And the one thing you cannot buy in life, is time, right? But the question is, everyone stops and says that. Oh, you can't buy yourself more time. But no one then says, well, then what can you do? Right? And I think there's only two things you can do. It's just like making money. It's either you spend less so that you save more, or you make more. It's only two things. So with time, either I say no to more things, which I do, or I literally buy more time as an extension of me, right? Which in my mind is a chief of staff.
Okay, real quick, because we have a lot of people that are CEOs that listen to this. If somebody was starting if I was going to go hire a chief of staff tomorrow, what would that first 6 months look like while they're there? Are they just shadowing everything I'm doing? Like, how do you get your brain into their brain as quickly and efficiently as possible?
You just said it.
Okay.
You just said it. It's literally shadowing everything.
Yep. Okay. You're just there.
Yeah. Like if my chief of staff didn't just fly back to DC, he would be sitting right next to me, hearing every word I'm saying, and just learning and thinking like me. He's on every call of mine. He's taking every action item. He's writing every email, all the LinkedIn messages, just everything. And right now, he's only been here for 2.5 months, my chief of staff. And so he's still learning. He's still learning my brain. He's still learning how my personality, my operational frameworks, right? He hates that every call of mine goes 20, 30 minutes over, but now he's realizing that it's the relational capital that matters most for me. So you learn that person's mind and brain. And the biggest word is trust. You just have to entrust them with everything. You have to entrust them with your email. You have to entrust them with your passwords. You have to entrust them with the phone calls. You can trust them with people's compensation. And if you don't fully trust them, then they can't be as valuable and helpful to you. It's just that simple.
Yep. And you just tell him, hey, anytime you have a question or you're wondering why I'm doing something, just ask me why. And I'll continue the quicker we can get reps, the more valuable we'll be together.
Exactly.
All right. So you're in the tech world. DocuSign goes in, becomes a really large company. And then you kind of mentioned that you were getting more interested to go back into, we'll call it Main Street America. I think you've called small business the heartbeat of America. So let's just start there. Why do you have an affinity and love for small to mid-size boring businesses? What is it about them that you love?
Well, besides the government, they're the largest employer in our country, right? So small companies make up the significant majority of our country, and small companies make up the significant majority of the wealth creation in our company. It's not the tech moguls and celebrity, Facebook, Google, FANG. It's not them. It's the millions of small businesses across America. And these small businesses really hold together our infrastructure, right? So when you just look at, I always just talk about a typical week of mine, but this week, right, I had to take my car in and they said I need to back tires and my brakes are not working, right? And there's something hanging from the bottom of my car. If the small business that I'm taking it to next week did not exist, I wouldn't have a car. Right. In our neighborhood, we don't have the big waste managements of the world, right? We have a smaller waste company. If that small waste company does not exist to come pick up my trash, it's a disaster, right? When my wife and I flew in on Sunday when I flew in on Sunday from the ranch there that I was talking to you about, my AC stopped working, right? A small business owner came out and he fixed my AC and put some more Freon in there. Right. The list goes. Tonight, after I leave his office, someone's going to come clean it. Right. So it's everywhere. I'm going to an event tonight. There's going to be a valet there. It's a small business. Right. Every single month, they have to clean the duck traps of this restaurant. That's a small business. The place cannot operate unless fire suppression safety works. So if the catches on fire, it doesn't burn it down for insurance purposes. That's a small business. So it runs everything, right? It runs everything. And the businesses that are even large in our mind, that are the larger local businesses, kind of the more the regional players, they're still smaller businesses, So I've always liked these smaller businesses. Now they make anywhere, the ones we look at, make anywhere between $2 million of net profit per year to about $10 million of net profit per year, right? Those are the wealthy dudes and gals in our country. Those are the people on the sidelines at the UT Austin games or the Alabama Crimson Tide games, right? They're the people flying their private planes down there. That they are making millions of dollars running a good, solid business, paying their tax dollars, right? Employing people and doing it humbly.
I love it. Okay, so you're at DocuSign and you realize you have this love for small business. What was, you probably could have gone and bought one and just ran it, but you decided to kind of build Garden City, which we'll get into. How did the idea came to be that you wanted to start acquiring businesses, and what kind of value did you think you were going to bring, or that you do bring?
Yeah, it actually started exactly as what you just said. Is my wife and I were just like, hey, I've always loved small businesses. DocuSign went public. I'm investing in a bunch of, whatever tech deals, knowing that I'm going to lose my money on most of them. And I'm like, why don't I just go invest in like a lifestyle-like business that will throw off like real estate-like yield, right? I have all these people that they go and they buy apartment complexes or rental houses, right? And it throws off 20% yield, 15% yield, right? Cash on cash, while the equity of the property is appraising. And I'm like, that's cool. I have zero passion for just making money or buying a property and real estate. I've never had it. I've always been obsessed with people. I'm very much a people person. And so I was like, what if we bought a business that employs people, a lot of people, and when we own it, it could throw off a yield. And our thing is we could actually provide really good jobs where people actually love their work and that they are invited into excellence and they're invited into having purpose at work so that they could go home and be better fathers and mothers. right? So why don't we do that? And I talked to someone about buying barbershops, like buying a handful of barbershops. I was like, yeah, okay, barbershops throwing up a couple $100,000 of free cash flow per year. I could buy a couple of them, I'll keep throwing off a couple $100,000 of free cash flow a year, and I could, really impact the people that work there, and that's where it started. And then people started telling me about the search fund space, the people that go to business school, they don't want to go work at a large enterprise, but instead they become entrepreneurs by acquiring a company. And that's called search fund. And so they're searching for a company to buy. And once they find that company to buy, they raise money from high net worth individuals. They go buy that business and run that business and scale that business and eventually sell that business. And I was like, whoa, never even heard of that. Like, that's super cool. You're telling me like guys and girls graduate from Stanford and Harvard and Booth and Northwestern, and instead of going to work for Microsoft and Google's of the world or Boeing, they're going to go and buy a small business. Like, wait, there's two people that have like brains that are like from this tech-ish world or could do really cool tech-ish stuff, but they're choosing boring, unsexy operating businesses, like, that's cool. Let me learn more about that. And then I found out that in this space, the internal rate of returns are 30+% over the last couple decades. So that blew me away. I was like, wow, you could actually make a lot of money. And then that's where it started being like, hey, instead of me buying some barbershops or whatever, car washes, what about if we just buy a lot of businesses and we build like a Berkshire Hathaway-like model, all with the focus on people, like a people first model where people could thrive, prosper, and flourish, all driven by our faith.
All right, let's keep going there. When you make that the focus, what are things that you're tangibly doing, things that are your edge that you're not seeing in other parts of the world that you kind of want to inflict on the world?
Like in these businesses that we buy? Are you referring to, there's three things we focus on. So let me know which one you're referring to. When we buy a business, we look at building a people first culture where they could all thrive. That's the goal, obviously. Two is technology enablement. So we really want to make it the most innovative company in their industry through technology. And number three is sales. So strategic sales. So leveraging our group of 50 investors to come alongside the business to make really strategic, unfair introductions that get them to knock down huge contracts so that our businesses could double very quickly. So culture, tech, and sales.
Well, let's go. We'll kind of go through each of them. But when you think of people first and you think of culture, how do you inflict a people first culture? Like, if you're going to buy my business tomorrow, maybe the question is, what are things that start happening the 12 months after you've bought me that might not have been happening before, that kind of is your spin on things or your flavor?
Yeah. So basically, the first thing that we do, the very, 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 very first thing we do is before we buy the business, we meet with all the key leaders, which not a lot of people do. So we meet with all the key leaders and I sit down with them myself, and it's the longest 2 days ever. And I just ask them three questions. I'm like, what's your story? And you can't talk about what you do at the company. So I want to actually know you, which they've never been asked.
Yeah.
They've never been asked. So you could just start and stop right there. That's one. Two is, if you were the new owners coming in, what is one thing that you would address very quickly? And you hear things like, either tactically, like, I'm in sales and I run sales and we don't have any sales support or account management or CRM or whatever it is. And then you hear some more intangible things such as, we want to work somewhere that I have opportunity to grow. I don't know what I got to do to get a promotion here, or we don't have any values or vision or mission, stuff like that. So you get really good insight. And then the last one is, if you were me as a new owner of the company, what's one thing you would definitely not change? Definitely don't touch, don't get close to, like, let it stay as is. And they're like, oh, I like our culture, or, oh, our product team's amazing, or, our brand's really good, or whatever it may be. Or like, hey, the founder is the best guy in the world. Like, we cannot lose him. Like, that's one, right? So that's That's one thing that we do at the gates. The other thing that we do is that we try to make everybody owners. So something I say all the time is if you want people to think like owners, make them owners. It kind of goes back to the same simplicity about like if you want the order, ask for the sale, right? Just ask. And so just if you want them to think like owners, make them owners, at least a management team. So out of the gates, we don't try to wait to see if they're going to ask us for equity. Maybe if they don't ask for it because they've never had it before, we don't bring it up. Yay, we saved a couple percent, So we just out of the gates make everyone owners. We put in a 401k plan very quickly and we match it, which most of these small businesses don't have that at all, So we do that. But probably the most important thing is we really start this journey of cultivating a healthy environment. That's what we do. A healthy environment where it's all based on trust and vulnerability and teamwork. And we get together right out of the gates to come up with our vision for the company, our mission for the company, and our non-negotiable values for the company. And then we teach people different models and frameworks that we're blown away they've never heard of, like radical candor. That in business, we're called to challenge each other very directly while caring deeply. And then we walk them through frameworks as to how to challenge each other directly, right, in a caring way. So we walk them through a thing called the clearing model, right? That if someone's late to a meeting, don't just call them out, be like, "Hey, you're late to a meeting again, Chris." Like, I don't want to have that happen again. And then you also don't want to not tell Chris anything that he's not late to a meeting. So we practice something where it's, in your one-on-one, or you ask Chris, "Can we have a clearing model?" And Chris says, "Yes, I have time right now." And you go, "Chris, 5 things. 1, facts. Facts are you were 5 minutes late to our meeting, and this is the second time this has happened. Number 2 is the story I tell myself. The story I tell myself is that you don't value our team meeting or you don't think it's important. 3 is the way it made me feel. The way it made me feel very, very disappointed in you, and it made me feel very angry. Right. Number 4 is my role. My role is that the first time you were late, I didn't say anything to you, and I should have, so that you knew that it was unacceptable. And what I want is to make sure that the next team meeting, you are not late, or if you are running late, you just give me a heads up, and then they repeat it back to you. And 95% of the time, Chris, after they repeat it back, it's already solved. Like there's not like, you don't have to come up with a plan. It's just a healthy way of communication. And in these small businesses, or in small families, right? Communication is everything. Communication is key, right?
I love that. Is there something that if you hear it while you're looking at the business and there's a certain answer, or maybe it looks good from the outside, but when you start getting in, it's an immediate, this isn't going to work for us? Are there things, what's your filter for looked good on paper, not good, going forward?
There's a lot. If things, I just call it our spidey sense, like if all of us are just really saying like our spidey senses in this deal is that it doesn't feel good, like it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. We just have to have the courage to say, it's a duck and we need to walk away from it, And so there's been a lot of deals that on paper, they're screaming good. Great industry, great competitive mode, great profitability. The management team is solid. I have 2 in my mind right now. And one of them, we flew down and we met with the management team and the meeting was going great. And something about it for us was just like, it's just not clicking for us. There were just some oddities about it. They got cold feet a little bit. We were not that excited about it. It just didn't feel right. It's kind of like, when you were dating before married and, that girl, she comes from a great family. She has great character. She's pretty. I don't know. It just feels weird. Yeah. It just feels weird. It doesn't click. It just does not click, It's the same exact thing with buying businesses sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just feels really natural. Yeah. And it just flows. And the business model flows. And the financials flow. And when you have conversations around valuation, it's clear. It's simple. We're both speaking the same language. On one call, we can knock it all out, versus other calls, it's just difficult. I would say the biggest thing is just the communication with the owner. If the owner's just sketchy, we feel that the deal's sketchy. Something we say a lot is, if it feels weird, it's going to be weird. right? Like we say that a lot. Like if it feels weird, it's going to be weird. And you're getting in bed with these people, even if they're selling you 100% of the business, so they're technically getting out. They never get out. They've been in this thing 60 hours a week for the last 190 years, or whatever it is, 30 years. I mean, they know everything. You're going to call them about 100 things that you forgot to transition out during the transition period, like no matter what, you're like, oh, wait, like we totally didn't know that you need bonding in this business. We didn't think about the car insurance. We didn't think about the Wi-Fi. Who still owns the domains, right? We forgot to transfer this domain. There's 100 things. And if it just doesn't jive well with that business owner, it's going to be hell.
Yep. Do you usually want the business owner, the businesses you buy, to stay on board, or are you kind of agnostic to that?
We typically want them to at least roll over equity. So we want them to at least own a piece of the business. It's kind of weird to us if they're trying to tell us what a great investment we're about to make and how the next, 5 years are the best years that's ever happened in history. And yet you don't want to roll over any equity. It's kind of weird, huh? But that's interesting. And so we're like, hey, we're giving you a chance to roll over. So instead of us paying you $10 million for this business, how about we pay you $9 million and you can maintain 10%. And so if the business makes $1 million a year, we take on 900,000, we take on 100,000. Sounds sweet to you, right? Don't you say it's going to make $1 million next year? Or wait, maybe you think it's going to make more, so you'll get more than 100,000, right? So you challenge them on it, and they really believe in the business. You're like, yeah, and if you give me 20, I'll take 20. I'm like, sweet, okay, good. And they're like, no, like no chance, not rolling anything over. I want out completely. I don't want no earn out, no rollover, no nothing. You're gonna like, there's something weird here.
They said, no, we're just being generous. We want you to have 100% of the upside. We would be being greedy by taking that 10%.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And we're just like, we're very clear. And we say what I just told you,
You've been, everything I've read is that I'm assuming, in the first 90 days post-close, one, you're probably buying businesses that you're not looking to just jump in and change. What does that first 90 days look like? Is it very, hey, don't change anything, observe and just kind of be a part? Or do you have kind of a 90-day playbook or a first 6-month playbook or anything of that nature?
I'll be completely honest.
Honest.
Yeah, is so many people are like, oh, what's your operational playbook? And I come up with a really amazing answer. Our operational playbook. You want to talk about our culture playbook or our technology operations playbook, or you want to talk about our sales playbook? So much of it. I mean, so much of it is being reactive to the fires you're putting out, right? And I remember Brent Beshore he's been the biggest help for me by far of launching and running Garden City. He was like, all this stuff that you're thinking about doing and all these strategies and all these amazing things, and these playbooks, he's like, throw it all out because you're going to be so much in putting out fire mode,
Yeah. And
that's what happens, as you buy a business and you realize how did we ever think about this in diligence that they literally don't have any salespeople? How? And it's because in diligence you're worried about 100 other things that are the thing, and then so you're like, oh, they've been telling us they clearly need salespeople. So what do you do your first 30 days? You try to find them a salesperson. Then you're like, oh, whoa, they don't even have a controller. We got to close out the books. We don't need a controller. And then they tell you that that they don't have emails. Their emails get stopped on the 17th of every month because of their weird local provider. That they got to pay more to if they don't want to. You're like, okay, now we got to roll out an email system, right? It goes on and on and on and on and on, right? So to the point of this amazing operational playbook, it's just you're trying to really come alongside. We're not trying to change a lot in the first 90 days, almost anything. We're just really trying to come alongside to the management team and ask them, where is it that you need the most amount of help? Where is it that is really keeping you up at night that we can help you out? One of our companies is the largest janitorial company. They're in Eastern Tennessee. And one of the things they told us at the gates is they were two things. One is we have 500 employees and we don't have a head of people. Like, so we don't have someone to actually look over our recruiters and our head of training. And when people leave, like we don't like, so it's like whack-a-mole. Like as a management team, we're just trying to step in the best we can. And we were like, why don't you have that? They're like, we just don't know where to get that person, how much to pay them, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, that's fair. And then the second thing is they're like, and we spend a lot of time doing payroll. It has to be weekly payroll for all these cleaners, it's hourly, it's time cards, it's hard. We're like, never thought about like an automated system. We're like, yes, we know that exists, but like, who's going to roll that out? Like, who's going to know which system to buy, how to procure it, how to implement it, and how to adopt it? And we're like, we can help you with those two things, So that's what we did, right?
Yeah. Okay. I think when people think of buying companies and holding company, our friend up in Omaha made the world believe that, you just kind of eat peanut brittle, you buy a company and then you just play gin the rest of your life and just let them go off. And one thing,
Warren Buffett is my godfather, right?
Yeah, he is. No. You had me there for a quick second. But then there's and I've talked to Brent about this, then there is a fine line between we're going to let you run your business and we just actually stepped over the line and now we're running your business.
Yes.
So if I were to say, hey, Michael, you're about to buy this company from me, what will my relationship with you look like? I'm rolling over. I'm going to still run the day-to-day, but what is my world going to look like with you? What is that going to look like?
From what we've seen, typically if someone's going to sell us your business, they're not really interested in staying on. We haven't seen it, like right now we're looking to buy minority stake of a business, about a third of a business. And it started off with majority. And he was just like, why am I going to be doing all the work as CEO, right? Sell you majority and keep doing it just for a salary. It makes no sense, and you're going to be taking home all the distribution, right? So like at that point, he's not going to work for just a salary. That's silly, And so he was like, look, but I don't want to sell right now. I still got it in me, but how about I sell a minority stake and I still run the business, and worst case is I sold the third of the company and get some chips off the table. Best case is I sold the third of the company, gets just off the table, and I inherited a partner that's going to help me grow so that my remaining 66% grows, right? But we haven't really seen owners that are like, hey, I want to sell my business and I just want to stay on it and run it. So I haven't seen that. But to answer your question is we really, really, really try to not run these companies, right? I mean, we have a small team of like 6-7 people. We're investors, right? We're looking for good deals. We are diligencing those deals. We're structuring them in a very fair, mutually beneficial way. And then we're trying to come alongside to help those companies grow. We put a very impressive board of directors on each one of our companies. And we just have a monthly call to check in on culture, tech, sales, and finances. But it's not our goal to run this. Right now, we've been running one of our companies and we all look at each other and we're like, this is horrible. This is not what we were supposed to be doing. But it's because we underestimated the power of the leadership team and we did not realize how integral the owner was. He did a little head fake on us. And it was our first deal. But he was very much more important than we thought.
Yeah. So if the CEO or the owner is leaving post-close, is one of your lines of something you need to get done is that you're going to replace that owner with a CEO almost immediately? Or do you kind of start recruiting once you've learned more about the business, once you've bought it?
Both, many scenarios. So the best sort of business that we buy is when we speak to a business owner and we're like, so what are your, so what have you all profited so far year to date? And they're like, I have no clue. Like 4 million, 3 million, 5, I have no clue. Sorry, I've been playing a lot of golf. We're like, That's good. And we're like, cool. Who's your biggest customer here this year? And they're like, XYZ. And then we come to find out XYZ was like 2 years ago. We're like, this is excellent.
Yeah.
And he's like, look, I don't know, but you have to ask my GM, ask my CFO, ask my head of sales, right? Like ask them, they're deep in the business, like I've been like, I own it but I really have it professionally managed, right? And we're like, that's what we want. We want to own it, but we want to have it professionally managed. So that works out really well. When the owner knows everything, right? That's an owner hustle, right? That's an owner hustle, which we don't look for those. We don't want those, obviously, right? So that's the thing.
Yep. All right, let's talk tech. You come from the tech world. I'm assuming you bring DocuSign into every company. If they're not using DocuSign, they're getting it.
You assume very correctly.
But okay, you've looked at a lot of these businesses. Let's just start with a broad question. Is like, what are most of these small service-based or small businesses lacking, just generally speaking? And then we'll get into kind of how y'all think about implementing tech. But what are most of them missing? Is it everything? Is it nothing? Is it certain parts of the business that's usually lacking? How would you categorize this?
Missing a lot. Depends which industries that they're in. If they're in any kind of IT service like industries, then they're naturally more tech enabled. They get it guilty by association, right? So they're more in the tech circles. They're more aware that there's a thing called Gmail and CRM and e-signature and everything like that. When you're looking at other industries that are, more in the contracting or trade or, construction or anything kind of more blue collar ish like that, it's bad. It's just really, 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 really bad. In a lot of cases, there's like no technology whatsoever. And if there is technology, it's not adopted at all. It's adopted to its core, to its bare minimal functionality and use. So the parts that we look at, kind of the three systems that we always take a look at. One is the financial systems. Like we need the ability to get a financial readout. So we looked at just installing Bill.com as well as QuickBooks, like out of the gates. We try to deploy that immediately. I would say, depending on industry, 50% of businesses that make between $2 and $10 million a year probably using a QuickBooks. If you are, awesome. If not, we're not surprised, and that's okay. So that's kind of the first area. The second area that we look for is just a CRM system, right? So just something that actually allows us to track and manage both the customers and the management that we have with customers, and or ideally the actual core operation as well. So, something like a Service Titan really helps with everything through A to Z, managing the customers and sales, as well as actually the service itself, the reminders, the dispatch, the operations, all that stuff, right? So that's ideal. Worst case, if it doesn't have a core operation in it, and like if it's a janitorial company and it only has just the CRM for sales, and doesn't have any capabilities in there for the core operations of cleaning and scheduling, that's fine. At least give us a CRM. And the third one is HR and people. Is we try to automate HR and payroll very quickly as well. So those are the three that we try to do out of the gates.
So if I were to take like Service Titan, and I know you know this probably better than anybody, and I've often said this, the best software in the world is useless if nobody uses it. And I would argue that it's more important that there's a team in place that actually knows how to implement software and make it become a part of the business, which is not a one training, hey, everybody look at Service Titan, this is how you do it, and now we're going to use this going forward. It could take up to a year to kind of get that to where it's second nature. So maybe my question is just, I know how I would do it if I was in the business every day, but how do you find that person that's going to be accountable for really deploying that software and making it a thing?
We use service providers and consultants. So someone on our team is full-time, and the gentleman on our team, he's managing the deployments of these softwares, but he's then working with service providers and IT companies to do all the different projects. So he's holding them accountable, having daily or weekly check-in calls, right, with both the portfolio management team as well as the service provider and us. Right. And so we're really spearheading it for them, right? Which they could all do this. Like if a small business owner is hearing this right now, he could do what we do, like the pool business that we own in South Florida. So Brent owns one in Arizona, as you know, and we own one in South Florida. The pool business, their website goes down a couple times a month. Their phone systems, you can't put people on hold. They have no SEO, right? They had no CRM, right? Just the list goes on and on and on. They're on old school POP3 email exchange, right? All of this. So we found and asked around a good IT consulting company, a 3-guy shop to deploy Office 365. They're great. They're local down there, and they're helping us with our domain and our SEO and our compliance and our fraud and our cyber and everything. And that's it. The old owner could have done that, right? But he didn't. So much of it just takes initiative, but we do stay on top and manage it, right? So that is very important, so it doesn't go by the wayside.
Yeah. Is that the same how you treat your third component, which is sales? Do you guys like to manage the sales training, or do you hire a consultant?
Well, both. So one is we believe big time in sales. So we believe you should have a sales leader. Right. A lot of small businesses, what we come to realize is they have this model where they are celebrating when sales happens. And so I'll give you an example. One of the companies that we own, we bought them, and a couple weeks in, I'm talking to the sales manager, and I'm saying like, "Hey, so what's your sales goal this month?" He's like, "I'll just keep it easy. $2 million. It's $24 million a year, though." It's like, last year we did more than that. He's like, yeah, $2 million. Like that should keep the lights on. I'm like, well, I didn't buy the business to keep the lights on. I bought the business to turn more lights on. And so I asked him, I go, so what's what sales reps are on the line of terminating that are not doing good because they've been here for a long time, and which ones, are crushing it, are doing great? He's like, I don't get the question. I go, which ones are not closing a lot that you're going to fire because they're not closing, and which other ones are doing good? And he said, Mike, why would we ever fire someone? It doesn't cost us anything. There's no salary on these people. And so if they bring in one sale a month, that's great for our business. And I was like, oh boy, we are completely on two different tracks. See, the issue, John, what's his name? Sales manager John, is where are all these appointments coming from? Our leads, our brand in the market, our online brand online, our word of mouth, our reputation, the marketing dollars we pay. So people call in, and then you send out the lead to different salespeople on the team, and then they bring home a lead, and you're okay with that, even if it took them 5% or 10% closing ratio. The issue is that you're talking to me as if this was Cutco, where Cutco did not give me a single thing. I could go to my neighborhood and have my next door neighbor give me an order, and I haven't sold anything in a year. And I go and I bring them an order, and Cutco says, that's awesome. You just brought us an order. It didn't cost us anything. We will gladly take that order. It costs them nothing. With us, every lead costs us money. So you're not measuring at all lead to close ratio. So we started tracking that. And not to our surprise, out of the team, 3 people in the team were closing less than 10%. They were closing 6, 7, 8%. So they were burning dozens of leads per week. The good sales reps were closing 25 to 45%, right? So what do? We put the ones on below 10% on performance improvement plans. We're going to track you. If you keep burning our leads, it costs us thousands of dollars, because if you were a better salesperson, you would actually close these, which will give us more money and give you more opportunity, right? If you're not doing that, then we're going to put you on a performance plan. We're going to have to let you go. We're going to hire someone else that hopefully closes more than you do, right? So that's like an example of what we would do in sales. It's just data. Just like, what's the average sales price that you're closing? So how much profit are you selling? And what's the actual lead to close ratio? Separate from that, right? Completely separate from that is we look at our investors, our 50 investors. So we have 50 pretty world-class investors. And if the company that we just bought does B2B, but they sell to businesses, we look at our investors and we say, which of our investors could actually help us close big deals? Because these small businesses, before we got involved, they would salivate of trying to get one of these meetings, get alone 20 of them. So the company we just bought does IT deployment for grocery stores, for fast food restaurants, for department stores, things like that. And so they would do Dollar General and Sports Authority, and you get the Publix and so forth. So when you look at our investors, Chris, it's the Publix family, it's the Chick-fil-A family, Costco, right? Just Popeyes, the list goes on and on. And so we told the GM of the business, hey, here's your new shareholders. And he's like, whoa, like 7 of them or 8 of them could be like the biggest account we ever landed. I was like, yeah, that's it. So before you keep calling cold people, focus on the people that actually own a piece of this company, right? So it's like legal insider trading, right?
Yeah. All right, that's a good segue into this. You have a structure that is unique, but probably becoming more popular, Permanent Capital. Why did you choose Permanent Capital? Why was that the thing that you wanted to do? And then maybe we can talk a little bit more about how it works.
I've always been fascinated by Warren Buffett and how when he finds a good business like a sees candy, he just allows it to just continue on in cash flow and uses that as a vehicle to invest in things like Coca-Cola and American Express, right? And so forth. And then once that starts to cash flow, he uses that cash flow to buy other businesses, and you get the snowball effect, right? And so I've always liked that. It just has made sense to me. And then I started to read research and data on it. And just here it is really simply. I was flying back with the same trip that you and I spoke about from the ranch. And a friend of mine and I were flying back, and he sold his company's private equity 6 years ago. His business was making about $10 million of free cash flow a year. He sold it for $6 million, or 6 times. So he sold it for $60 million. He sold half of it, right? And now they've grown into law, and they're about to sell it for like 15 times. Okay. And let's just say that this friend of mine has a net worth after this transaction of about $100 million. Big deal. He keeps getting diluted every time private equity does around. So he's worth $100 million, Chris. And so I asked him, hey, I'm not going to say his name, but hey, friend, 6 years later, what would your cash flow be this year? What would that be? He was like, probably 25 million free cash flow. I was like, wow, that's incredible. So he would have like doubled. He's like, yeah, it would have probably doubled in the last 6 years just on organic growth. I go, and you're worth how much? You go, after this transaction, I'm about to do about 100 million. I was like, so if you had this business still in 4 years from today, not including what you made the last 6 years, you would get 100 million. That next year, or the next 4 years, another 100. The next 4 years, another 100. That's just not growing. And another 100, another 100, another 100. And he was like, yeah, I regret it. I focused on the big pile of money now instead of the ongoing continuous stream of income later. And when you get that big payout, now there's tax consequences. And now guess what he has to do with the money? Find a vehicle to go invest it into, right? And find a way to diversify, right? Versus before, he had it in a vehicle that he knew more about than anybody else, right? And so clearly, if anyone's thinking about selling their business to me right now, I'm clearly talking them kind of out of it, right? And the other thing about it is, for me, business is a platform, right? And so your business is a platform. So when you sell your business, are you selling your platform? Right? Are you selling your opportunity to bless and impact people? Now, granted, if you're retiring and those days are gone and you don't have a son or daughter in the business, then you have no other option to sell. But my friend's in his 40s, right? So he was focused on a big sum of money rather than ongoing capital stream, where to invest this large pile of capital now, and he lost his platform.
Go a little deeper on platform, being able to bless and help people. How do you think about that? And I don't think they don't say that in business school. Own a business so that you can bless and help people. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So there's so many nonprofits out there focused on going into for-profit businesses to try to impact lives in the marketplace. And because we spend most of our time in the marketplace, right? In our life, we spend our time working and sleeping. And so those nonprofits have to ask for permission, right? They have to ask for permission. So when it's a giving nonprofit, or when it's a chaplain, right? Like Corporate Chaplains of America nonprofit, or when it's whatever it may be, right? They have to ask for permission. When you're the owner, you don't have to ask for permission. You're like, here's what we're going to do, right? So you have authority and say over what you want to do, around how you want to bless people. I had a call today with the business owner that he owns a bank out in Kansas. And every single Christmas, he puts $1,000 in his hundreds of employees' accounts. He puts it in a donor advised fund, and he tells them to go ahead and gift it out, right? After he goes ahead and gifts it out, every year his giving on his company grows by 1%. So he's owned the company now for 35 years. So he gives 35% away. Next year will be 36%. The next year, 37%. Of that he gives away, based on your tenure in the company, gives you an end of the year bonus, right? So he uses his company to bless people, is my net of it, The way that we say is the two biggest things that ruins marriages the two hardest things in life is marriages and finances, right? So if we want people to come to work ready to crush it and excited to work and giving it their best and how they're interacting with each other and their customers, we know the two biggest things, and data shows us, Barna Group shows us, it's finances and marriage. So let's bless people's marriage, right? By giving them marital counseling, which we do, or marital books, which we do, or resources, which we do, right? Or financial counseling, right? So give them access to certain groups, right? That provide, there's a lot of nonprofits out there that provide free resources on how to save or on how to get out of debt. Dave Ramsey, right? So a lot of people just are not encouraged or not given these resources, right? And so for us, it's like, how can we use business as a force for good to bless people so they can be better husbands, better wives? And in return, it's an actual investment, right? Like Chick-fil-A, Dan Cathy is one of our investors. And when you ask Chick-fil-A, if everything was not about honoring God and blessing your people and serving your people, how much more revenue do you think that y'all would do? He says 0, right? Like I think we'd be worth 0. So he sees that is their business. That's what leads to their tens of billions of dollars, right? That leads them to grow by double-digit year-over-year growth when the whole industry is decreasing by single-digit, right? When they're closed on Sundays, yet their average store is grossing millions of dollars, right? The model does not make sense. The model is silly when you say it out loud, yet it's uncomparable to any other model by far. But they're obsessed with blessing people. So it's not a nice to do. They do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's the smart business decision. Costco does it, Trader Joe's, Patagonia, Publix, right? A lot of businesses that do it, they do it because it's the right thing, but it's their moat. It is their moat. It is what sets them apart.
Do you think it's possible to take a company that didn't think that way and instill that? Or does that have to kind of start at the beginning in the DNA of what started it? I would imagine it's harder to push a company there that's done something away for 30 years, or do you have a different opinion on that?
It's all about the founder's heart. It's all about their founder's heart. It's all about the person who runs it heart. You could have a person, and there's a lot of stories like this where a guy's life was a total wreck. It's all about the profit. It's all about work. It's all about self. People are exposable. They're all a cog in the wheel, and then they have a sudden life change. Maybe they find faith, right? That they start realizing that life's about serving others, and they start realizing that businesses just exist for people and among people. There is no business if there's not people. And they start to realize, so it has to start with them personally, and they could easily start to change that. Happens with us, goes from one owner to the other owner, same business, same customers, same people, same office, same logo, completely different story.
I did an episode 3 ago with a guy named Steve Robinson, who was the chief marketing officer at Chick-fil-A for 35 years. And it was...
Oh, yeah, I know his son. Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. Yeah, it was
he wrote a great book.
The Covert Cows. I had to read it before we actually would record. That was his one ask. And so it was cool hearing that Dan Cathy's involved. Man, that's incredible. Just talk a little bit about how permanent capital actually works, because some people in the finance world say, that's weird. The whole finance world is built on a return in like 3 to 5 years, and you're telling me you're going to take my money forever.
And my response to them is, say what you just said. In private equity is that you get a return in 3 to 5 years. And our thing is you will also get a return with us in 3 to 5 years. Now, you're not going to get 3 to 5 times your initial investment. It's going to be more like a property. So if you go ahead and you buy a real estate property, and let's just say that this real estate property is yielding $250K a year of income, right? And you buy it for 5 times that cash flow, that rental income. Well, one way to view it is first year you make $250K, and the next year you make $250K, and the next year you make $250K, and eventually, once you hit that 6th year, you got all your money back. So what happens year 7, 8, 9, 10 to from here, as Buzz Lightyear says, infinity and beyond? Keeps cash flowing. So ours is the same exact thing with our investors. It's like, yeah, we buy a business, it's cash flowing. We buy it for a certain time multiple. And based on the cash flow of the business, we pay you out of the cash flow. And you get your money back in a couple of years, depending what multiple we buy the business for, and depending how much more we want to reinvest back in. So you'll get your money back. And if we go lights out and we grow the business like crazy, maybe you get your full capital back in 3 to 4 years. Probably more like 5 to 6, And then from there, years 7 onwards, you're just getting a nice mailbox money. You're just getting a nice distribution in the mail. So that's different. Yes, that is different than you buy a business. You grow it, you get multiple arbitrage, you buy it with a bunch of debt, you bolt it on with a bunch of other businesses, and you flip it for 2 to 4 times, right? And that's great. That's awesome. And I'm a fund in some of those deals, or I'm an LP in some of those funds of those deals. It's just not what I was called to. I like more of the predictable cash flow things of buying and holding.
Okay, so then I have 2 questions. What do you... I'm assuming you control cash at the business level. So how do you tell your CEOs either, is there a hurdle rate that you say, if you can't meet this threshold, quote unquote, I guess you're in Atlanta, correct? Well, I was going to say send the cash to Omaha, but we'll say send the cash to Atlanta. So maybe you could give a little color in how that works. And then on your end, how you determine what you're going to do with the cash once you get it. Are you going to put it in another business, or are you going to send it to investors? So there's kind of 2 ways that cash makes its way out the door. How do you think about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So the CEOs that have equity, just like us, we don't eat until our investors eat first and maybe get a little dessert. And then we come to the table and eat, right? AKA, we don't make money until our investors get their money back and some, right? And so our CEOs and our management team are in the same position that we're in. So we are working to pay back the shareholders that allowed us to buy the company. Once they get their capital back, now we're all eating together, right? And so our management team, they know that when they say, hey, we need to hire a head of sales for X $100,000 a year, it's going to hurt the time that we're going to pay back that cash flow, right? But if we believe it's an investment, we'll make it all together, right? And so that's the way it works. And once that company starts to make money for us with that cash flow, we'll typically just pay it out. We'll make the necessary investments into the business that it needs to for the long term. And besides that, we'll start to cash flow it out. We typically won't use that cash flow for other businesses unless it's in the identical space and in the same business. Because on our deals, Chris, depending what deal it is, we bring some strategic co-investors alongside. So it wouldn't really be fair to use the cash flow of that company for a whole nother deal, if that makes sense, if they're not involved in that.
All right. Got a couple more and then we'll bring it home. This has been awesome. I think we just kind of touched on it with talking about Chick-fil-A, but somebody on Twitter, I put a tweet out saying, does anybody have questions for Mike? And one that came in that I liked was, what's his favorite example or story of a Christian businessman that has killed it in both their biz and their walk with the Lord? Many times you hear them excelling in one and not the other. Is there an example you have? We talked about the Cathy family. They are the model, but is there another cool story that maybe you'd share?
That's a layup. I wish you gave me a harder question.
I got a couple zingers coming.
Yeah. That's an easy one. If you're listening to this podcast and your faith is important to you, but you feel as though some days you find yourself running on empty, and you feel as though your pace is too quick, too fast, and sometimes your family even sees you deteriorating before their own very eyes, I give you grace, because there is a book that is my favorite book I've ever read from a business leader that he had to burn out completely, but he rescued it through God. God was able to rescue him. And his name is Terry Looper. And the name of the book is called Sacred Pace. And Terry burned out and he was like, you know what? I'm going to start completely different. I'm not going to set any sales goals. And I'm only going to work 40 hours a week for the rest of my life. No more than 40 hours a week. And so Terry started that business a while back, and he's done pretty well. Yeah, Terry's done pretty well. His company does about $5 to $6 billion a year. He owns 100% of it. And he, anytime I call Terry, he's like, "Mike, hey, what you doing?" Just like, just trying to figure out life, Terry. What are you doing? He's like, "Oh, not much. Just sitting here having a glass of wine with Doris. Doris, say hi." And I'm like, "You're always just like at the fire pit, just having a glass of wine." I'm like, "Yeah, I got to come home." And then I'll call him again, like, "Mike, what you doing?" "Oh, Terry, I'm just burning out. I got a headache. I haven't seen blah, blah, blah." "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, just finished a Bible study here with my grandson, blah, blah." Or, "Hey, I just got to Big Sur, about to go play golf with my family." Always available, always present, never has too much on his plate, says no constantly, always in the Word of God, always with his family. It's amazing. And yet alone has built an incredible business while honoring God, while most of all honoring his family.
I look forward to reading that book. I'm going to order it when we're done. Can you spoil what the business is? Is it something we would know, or is it a...
Yeah, it's in Houston. It's called Texon. It's a very large oil company that does commodity trading in the oil space. But Terry should absolutely be on your podcast.
I'm going to maybe reach out to him. I appreciate that. A mutual friend of ours said, slowing down. You might know who asked me this question or told me to ask this question. Slowing down, why did he consciously decide to do this? And what have been your consequences, good and bad?
You got to tell me after the podcast who that was.
You were at a ranch with him this weekend.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. Last year was on the surface a really awesome year. Bought several companies. My network blew up, to the point that I'd be driving home in the car with my wife, like, "Oh, I got to answer this. It's XYZ person. Like, that's insane that he even has my number, that's cool." Or like, "Got to go to that. I mean, who gets invited to, blah, 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 blah." Like, that's insane, or like, yeah, and so forth. And so network grew. The private investments blew up, in a good way, like did really well. Just everything. It was awesome. It was great. Just crushing it financially, crushing it with the network, the connections, just everything that I've ever wanted as a little boy, you know, like finally I've made it. This is incredible. And then every Christmas I take my family to the beach. That's my favorite place in the world. My 3 little kiddos, and it's my happy place. And I'm on the beach down in the Caribbean, and I'm not happy. I'm like, whoa, like, hold on. I'm at the beach. I love the place we're staying. I'm with my kiddos. What is going on? It's not there. It's there every year. It's not there. And I trained myself to get my identity from who I knew and what I did, and being addicted to performance to the point that I was like, this is really bad. Like, I'm with things that matter most, my family and kids on the beach after Christmas, and I'm not on the treadmill, figuratively speaking, and I feel like I have no purpose. I feel like no identity. So thankfully, through some conversations there with some friends and a mentor and a spiritual director and everything, I basically said my theme for 2022 onwards is to desire less and to totally divert. So I said no to every single business event in 2022. So literally have not gone to a business event this whole entire year. My best friends host incredible events, and I don't go. And I believe that I just want to desire less. And even when it comes to the fundraise, like, we'll probably deploy our whole fund instead of 5.5 years, probably 3 years. And it's like, oh, are you going to raise 150 million? Are you going to raise 250 million? Are you going to raise blah, blah, blah? It's like, no, I think I need to desire less. I think maybe we just have a flat raise. We just have the same fundraise again, you know? And so the good side, the positive side, Chris, is you get to reap the fruit of what matters most. Which is time with your family, which is being present, which is love, joy, peace, patience, joy in just the little things, like having fun. I got robbed in my childhood. There's another great book called Becoming a King that's incredible, and just talks about, you know, getting robbed of your childhood and becoming more of your true self. So it's a difficult journey when you compare it to the world, but when you're basking in it, like today, I'm home. Yesterday, I'm home. The day before, tomorrow, this weekend, I got nothing to do. It's 5 o'clock. I'm going to go home and hang out with my wife and watch my kids, and just, that's it. There was probably a bunch of dinners I could do tonight. A bunch of friends that asked me to go and play golf or hit balls or meet them at their house for a drink or blah, blah, blah. And I just say no to everything now because I'm just really believing that my family matters most. So that's the good stuff. The bad stuff is, I mean, not to get too over spiritual, but I think when you desire less, you will probably get less. I know the whole other side of it of like, when you desire less, like, God will bless you and you'll get so much more because you desired less, and naturally your vat overflows. And it's like, maybe, I don't think so. I think that I know a lot of people who desire a lot and they leave it all in the field and they are constantly striving and they have a lot. They have big, nice, fancy toys, and they're, you know, a lot of people, and and they have a lot. I think the downside is that when I compare myself to that, my insecurities flare up, you know? And so that's a downside, you know, is when you desire less, you have less, and you just have to be okay with that and realize that what you have is actually worth more than the less.
And the world that we live in today is not, the mainstream narrative is not consume less. It is, I mean, you can't get on the internet, you can't get on your phone without finding something to buy or a trip to go to, or you see your, you know, friend's family looks like they're having a great time on the beach. Little do you know, they were probably fighting right before that picture, but it still looks great. It makes it tougher for sure.
Yeah. And it's surrounding yourself by people that are not like you. So we have an au pair from Italy, and I think it was God's gift to us that she's in our family, because like every day she just gets a needle and pops the bubble that I live in, where it's like in our Western society of America, everything is do the least you can to try to get the most you can in the quickest amount of time that you can. Right. And she just constantly like, man, like, I don't get this. everyone's here on vacation, but everyone's on their phone. Like, she's from Europe, and she's like, why do they come here to be on their phone? I'm like, it's a good question. Or she's like, why do they go out to dinner and spend all this money at such a beautiful restaurant and they just scarf it down so quickly and they're gone in an hour? Like, why don't they just sit there and talk and laugh for like 3 to 4 hours? I'm like, that's a good question, Or she's just like, why are they working so hard? Like, why do they work so much? Like, why? Like, we all like, and so this outside perspective of the East comparing to our Western hemisphere, Western society, we live in a bubble. Like, as a nation, we live in a bubble of all bubbles. It's just work, get more, do more. All with so I'm really trying to zoom out and say, what does a slower life look like? Another great book is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. So there's a theme here. The theme is not do more, faster, make more, be hurried, right? It's all the opposite of that. It's be present, be slow, desire less.
And actually enjoy the Sabbath, which is the day that God gave us to do all that. I read John Mark Comer, and that I got done with that going like, man, my Sundays are usually now my busiest days. And just taking that one day of rest actually has had a huge impact on my life.
Yeah, and telling people, like, not caring. Like, I don't care anymore. I'll leave, and people, I don't care what they think there when I say this. But people email me asking me for time or asking me for advice or asking me for whatever. And a lot of times I won't even respond. Who came up with the rule that whenever random strangers email you, you must email them all back? Or when people ask you for your time, you have to give people your time. And so a good rule of thumb is that if you wouldn't take the call with this person tomorrow, don't take the call 3 weeks from now and schedule it, And so this has been a process for me that I was like, okay, I feel bad as a Christian leader, like just not answering them. So let me just, instead of taking the call, ask them what they want to speak about. And then they email me like 17 questions. Now what do? Now I'm even in a deeper hole. So now I just have a template that says like, hey, thanks so much for your email. Unfortunately, I'm in a season right now. I don't know when I'll get out of it, but I'm in a season right now that I'm just not taking on calls. I'm not responding to emails. I'm really trying to focus on my wife and kids. I'm trying to steward my business well. And unfortunately, with my wife and family and stewarding my business well and friends and self, I don't have time to respond to emails and to call people and to attend things. So I hope you understand. And the responses, I think it really makes people be like, wow, like I respect that, And if they don't like that, I don't care because you're not my wife or kids, And so you just have to stop caring what people think. Like, really, this whole digital thing, where does it stop?
That is a great question. I honestly think the pendulum is shifting in a lot of ways where there's a lot more the narrative of this is not sustainable long term. And to what your point, we strapped a little camera to our, it's always in our computer in our pocket that not only makes the emails come in at a pace, but it gives you an opportunity to see them all day, every day. And I struggle with the same thing, man. Like, how do you politely not engage, but not get that FOMO that, man, if I miss this could be the thing, this could be the email that, or I always think I always wanted people to answer my email when I was coming up in the business. I feel like I have to do this for that person. And there's some days I follow your rule and I'm like, I'm not responding to anybody. And then every now and again, I just totally cave and I'm like, I'm going to respond to everybody. And I need to get better at it.
I know exactly what you mean. And the thing is, give yourself grace. There's so much more of like who's gonna be at your funeral, right? I'd rather love a select few than just touch, many. So I do believe that we are called to love on people and we are called to mentor people. But if all I'm doing is being responsive, I can never be proactive, right? So it's just that simple.
Mike, you've been generous with your time. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm really glad that we're connected. Thank you very much.
Same. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Chris.